Welcome back to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. Now, it doesn't come cheap, and as the supreme fruit of gastronomy, it can cost up to £17 for a 500-gram pack or more. But that won't deter foie gras from being dished up at countless Christmas celebrations. Indeed, sales are booming in London and the UK. This year, Fortnum & Mason will shift around £500,000 worth, twice the amount of a few years ago, and the British market alone is worth around £25 million a year. But in response to the anger among animal rights campaigners, many outlets have banned its sale, including Harvey Nichols, Ocado and Selfridges. You can't get it at Lord's Cricket Ground or Wimbledon. Only two major department stores in London, the Queen's Grocer Fortnum's and Harrods, are still holding out. But Fortnum's in particular has become the target of a sustained campaign. The reason for this outrage? Well, the clue is in the name. Foie gras is French for fatty liver, and the description of how it gets to this state is, on first hearing, not for the faint-hearted. At 15 weeks, the ducks or geese are placed in open-top pens and force-fed 250 grams of grain 4 times a day for the next 2 to 3 weeks. A pipe passes about 30 centimetres down the goose's throat and the grain is pumped into its crop in 2 seconds. Its liver swells up to 10 times its normal size and gives foie gras its buttery taste. But some say the animal does not suffer distress and is no more cruel than the rearing of other animals for consumption. California has banned its sale, Italy's co-op supermarket chain has stopped selling it, and the British caterer group Compass Group, which is a supplier to Michelin star restaurants, has dropped foie gras from its list. And the fast food chain Wendy's has just announced that it was pulling foie gras off its menu in Japan. So, is it torture in a tin as defined by animal rights activists, or simply a traditional delicacy that dates back centuries, whose production is no more cruel than other products? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Nick Lander. He's a restaurant correspondent for the FT and author of the book The Art of the Restaurateur. Thomas Maeli, who's a French chef living in the UK and managing director of Mr. Duck's Delicacies, which produces and distributes duck products to delis and retailers in London. Also here is Mimi Bekshi. She's Associate Director for the group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. And on the phone we have Justin Kurswell, Campaigns Manager for Vegetarians International Voice for Animals, or VIVA. Thomas, if it's considered too cruel to make in the UK, surely it's too cruel to buy in the UK.
Well, the problem is, I think it's for all the animals production. I think there is good farm and bad farm. I can see some of the movie that we can see online. That things that I never saw because I'm a country boy, and I saw just a small farmer who does work, and they are very close to the animals. So for me, it's not cruel at all to produce the liver, the duck, as I know, and as they are done in France. Yeah.
Well, can you describe the conditions for foie gras production? I mean, take me through what actually happens.
All my ducks are coming from the Vendée and Bretagne, and for me it's very difficult to find a small farmer who does export because it's all they are big and the conditions they are not as I would like to see. Or they are too small and they are not able to export in England because it's quite expensive. All organic, I think, like GM-free, all the grain, because a lot of there is some production who use like flour and things like that. And for me, it's very important that they are selecting the grain. And some of the farmers they grow themselves the corn. The duck live outside all the time of his life. And there is only 10 days to 15 days in the park.
Can I put that to Mimi Bekshi from PETA? They are actually free range, effectively, for them to produce the kind of quality foie gras that gourmands, I suppose, want. They have a better life than, I guess, battery chickens, don't they? I mean, it's not so cruel, is it?
Up until a point, when they start being force fed, then they're kept in pens or cages, and during those last 15 days of their lives, they're force-fed 3 or 4 times a day, every single day, by having a metal pipe rammed down their throat and huge amounts of food forced into their stomachs. It's really a cruel process. Like you said, it's banned in the UK, and you shouldn't be allowed to sell a product here that you can't produce here for ethical reasons.
Do you have any proof that the animals are actually in any kind of distress?
Well, absolutely. The scientific consensus is that there's no humane way to produce foie gras. The Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN has said that you can't produce it humanely. The EU Scientific Animal Health and Welfare Committee has said that you can't produce it humanely. And we actually just filmed on a couple of these supposed high welfare farms. The Sarlat Périgord Cooperative is supposedly some of the highest welfare foie gras producers in France. And on those farms, we witnessed geese who were struggling to stand, still not being spared the force feeding. We we witnessed geese panting constantly because their distended livers are pressing against their lungs. It makes it really hard for them to breathe. And then we also filmed in the abattoir where they're all killed. And some of them weren't stunned beforehand. And you can see them lifting their heads, and blood is pouring out of their necks, and it takes them several minutes to die. It's absolutely a horrific procedure.
What's your response to that, Thomas?
First of all, I think the scientific, l'INRA did a test on the duck on the stress of for the first feeding, and the result was they didn't find out that it was a stress. I imagine that there is big company who employ people who are not professional, and probably there is some problem there. And because they use as well, the space is very expensive in the business. But when you use like small farms, they have like a lot of space, and the duck, they are not force-fed 3 times a day, but twice. And it's not so much quantity, because for big industrials, they are going to try to make it the bigger as possible. And what they try to reach in a small farm is just the quality of the liver, which are going to give a better product. Now, the killing of the animals, I think there is some rules that need to be changed. Even in France, some farmers are complaining about that.
You're listening to The Voice of Russia in London with me, Brendan Cole. Should foie gras be sold in the UK? I'm discussing this with Thomas Maeli, a French chef living in the UK, Nick Lander, restaurant correspondent for the Financial Times, Mimi Bekshi, Associate Director for People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, and Justin Kerswell, Campaigns Manager for Vegetarians International, Voice for Animals. Nick Lander from the FT. It seems that foie gras production has certainly got a heightened public consciousness over the last 10 years, and I suppose you could put that down to groups like PETA or Viva or campaigners or whatever. But it still hasn't really spoiled people's appetite for it. It's more popular than ever. I mean, how important is it for gastronomy?
Well, it's absolutely delicious in small doses. It's a very flexible product because it can be used, for example, as a terrine or sautéed in a salad, or part of a pithivier, which is how I ate it in Paris 3 weeks ago, and it was absolutely fantastic. And then there are also chefs and restaurateurs with consciences themselves who can choose whether they're going to serve it or not, and there are quite a few who choose not to. So I think the main objection I have to the total banning of this product is that it's part of our cultural heritage and has been for centuries. It's a source of income in rural areas of France, which, if it was destroyed, would leave quite a lot of unemployed people in areas where there are not many other sources of employment. And it is something that actually any adult can take or leave. They can choose to buy it. The reason it's very popular at the moment in London in particular is, of course, it's a function of the economy. There are a lot of wealthy people in London, living in London from all over the world as well as the English. And that's one of the reasons, that's one of the ways of showing their wealth.
Do you really see it as part of British cuisine, though? It's a particularly French product, I mean, even if it's been eaten in the UK for centuries.
Yes, but I mean, London is an international city. So whether it's Britain's English buying it or not, it turns up on a lot of French menus and it turns up on a lot of English menus. It is just one of those products that actually a very good chef can do an awful lot of very good dishes with.
Justin Kerswell from Viva, that's fair enough, isn't it? People have the choice whether or not they make an ethical decision as to whether they eat it or not, but it's no grounds for a complete ban, is it?
The EU has ruled that no country that doesn't currently produce foie gras can start foie gras industry because it is so cruel. So we have this madness that we have sovereign welfare laws in this country which prohibit the importation of it. So there's no cultural heritage in Britain of eating foie gras at all.
Well, I served it on my menu 25 years ago, 30 years ago. It's been around. If you look at Victorian menus, you'll find foie gras was on them in London.
But it's not a British cultural thing, and also we have to think about other things. I mean, in a society we have responsibilities to each other and to animals. And for instance, we ban the importation of dog and cat fur into the EU. Now, you could argue the case that people should be allowed to wear dog and cat fur if they wanted to, but we've decided as a society that is wrong. And I think the majority of people in Britain believe that foie gras production is wrong. The government believes it's wrong. It's just that we have this crazy set of trade laws which allow something that's illegal to produce in this country to be imported into this country.
I don't think the majority of people in this country know what foie gras is.
Well,
it's a very, very small niche market that is produced in a small area of France, and sold to several stores and scores of restaurants. That's it. And it's up to the individual, once it's there, to either buy it or not. It's a very simple state of affairs.
Well, I would argue it's not a small industry. I mean, we're talking about 38 million birds in France each year, and there's about 97.5% of those are ducks. 87% of those are caged, and it's sworn into the cultural heritage of France that it has to be French foie gras. It has to come from force feeding. Of course, that's the crux of it. We're talking about making a bird, giving them a diseased liver. So essentially, we're creating a disease within an animal, and that can never ethically be right.
I mean, is that true, though, Mimi? I mean, the idea that it's a diseased animal, it's common for waterfowl to store fat before they go off and migrate. Is it fair to call it like a diseased animal?
Well, that's exactly what it is. It is a diseased liver. That's what you induce when you produce foie gras. You swell the liver up to 10 times its normal size. Even for migratory birds, the maximum that they would ever grow their liver to is 1.5, maximum 2 times its normal size. Like I said, these livers are so huge that they're actually pressing against their lungs and making it very difficult for the birds to breathe. So they are, of course, incredibly stressed. We have filmed on duck foie gras farms, on goose foie gras farms, on small ones, on big ones, and in every single one you always see the same thing. Birds that are under a huge amount of distress and who are suffering. Like I said, the EU Scientific Committee on Animal Health and Welfare produced an 80-page report about foie gras production, and at the end they concluded that there is no humane way to produce foie gras.
It concluded that force feeding, as currently practiced, is detrimental to the welfare of the birds, but it couldn't scientifically conclude that the animals were under distress, though, could it?
Actually, if you ask any avian expert, any poultry expert, they will tell you the same thing. When you try to create a liver that is 10 times its normal size in the bird, there is no way to do that humanely. If you ask vets, if you ask poultry experts, they will all tell you the same thing. Dr. Van Beck, who is a poultry expert, is very clear on the subject.
Thomas, I mean, they seem that there's absolutely no doubt at all that the bird is suffering, but you don't agree with that, do you?
No, but I don't live the same. I don't see the same the same bird. Alors, first of all, it's not a disease because it's something. It's not like us. Ducks are completely different, and if they stop eating, the liver is going to go back. It's a normal processus for the duck to do that, and we just declench at different moments because normally it's before traveling. But my experience are not the same as I don't see other birds as like you are talking about, because half of the movie that you produce, they are coming from Canada or like a big farm that I never visited or things like that. So that's the kind of bird I don't know. I don't see. The one I know, they are in a farm, and some of them they are even coming back sometimes just to eat again, because they doesn't fill it up the duck at full things. They just fill it up as it should be, because they doesn't have any throat. It's like a bag where the grain goes, and after that there is the gizzard to crush them for them to be able to eat, to digest it. They doesn't have any teeth, to eat the grain. So I don't know. I don't live the same experience as you do, and now as I say, I am a country boy. So I live differently as, before, we used to buy the lamb, and the butcher used to come in our kitchen and do everything on the table, prepare the meat for the year. And for me, probably I don't live the same way as, probably somebody who lives in the town or something like that. I don't understand, the things.
Mimi, your reaction to that?
Like I said, we filmed on foie gras farms in France just recently, and these were part of the Sarlat-Périgord cooperative, which claims the highest welfare standards in France. And on these farms, we saw birds who were unable to hold their own weight, who weren't able to walk, who were still being force-fed. We saw birds who were panting constantly. This is the same farm where Fortnum and Mason actually went and filmed on this farm to show just how high welfare standards are for their foie gras. Okay. And we filmed the very opposite of that on the same exact farm.
So your target now is Fortnum and Mason's, is that right?
Absolutely. At the moment, we have a campaign to try to get Fortnum and Mason to stop selling foie gras. It's shameful that a store that claims to, represent Britishness is serving a product that's too cruel to produce here. And we've had a huge amount of support for the campaign.
But isn't there? I mean, wouldn't a kind of ban mean it would just force people to look for it elsewhere, and they're always going to find it? And presumably, you wouldn't want it forced to be produced in worse conditions than you're saying are already being produced.
Impossible.
Well, how can something that's been around for hundreds of years that will suddenly disappear? I mean, is that your goal?
Absolutely, it's our goal. And we had slavery for hundreds of years. Thankfully, we don't have that anymore.
But that was a cruelty to fellow human beings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And we may not be the same as geese and ducks, but in the important ways we are. They feel pain and they feel fear just in the same way that we do. And we know that for a fact. So if we know that, how can we in good conscience inflict that sort of pain and fear upon them?
Well, no, the report of which you referred to earlier with the European Union said it was detrimental to the welfare of the birds. There was no proof, categorical proof, that the birds were actually under stress or evaded being fed.
Well, and I also think that I take exception to the fact that they say that these livers are diseased, because if they were, there'd be no way that they could be sold under EU law. Diseased is a very emotive word, and I think it's completely inaccurate in this case.
Justin Kurzweil, I mean, a diseased animal. It's an emotive word, and it's an unfair attribution.
Well, it's a recognised medical condition, the diseased liver. I mean, it's foie gras, French for fat liver. I think one of the important things to mention...
Hang on a minute, but also you're implying that if it's diseased and it's eaten by a fellow human being, then they will become diseased.
Well, there are links between Alzheimer's and foie gras production, which there's a medical paper that actually makes this connection.
I can understand.
Let's let Justin finish his point.
Yes, I mean, there is a medical paper that does make that connection. One thing I'd like to point out, though, of course, is this idea that we're somehow pitting Britain against France, because we work very closely with French groups. In fact, there's an increasing number of French groups who are anti-foie gras production. There's Stop Gavage, and Gavage is the French term for force feeding. They're very active in France, and there's groups popping up all over the place, and across Europe as well. So it's not, and there's a group of EU MEPs are looking to secure an EU-wide ban. Now, the idea of it being pushed elsewhere certainly is produced in other countries. It's not just France; it's Hungary, it's also China. Now, in Hungary, there were details recently about the live plucking of birds, which is illegal in the EU, but still happens, and some foie gras birds are live plucked, so they suffer that, and then they're also force-fed. So we have that. The other point I'd just like to make quickly, of course, it's not just the 38 million ducks and geese that are killed for foie gras production each year. It's also the female ducklings. It's only male ducks that are used. Male and female geese are used in foie gras production. But the female ducks are killed invariably a day or two old, simply because they don't put on as much weight as their brothers do, and that is by being thrown alive into mincers or being gassed. And so ultimately we're talking about a morally bankrupt food, which has no place in any civilized society.
Nick Lander, a morally bankrupt food?
Well, I just think that's more emotive language, and it evades the whole question that I thought we were brought in to discuss. You know, if you're going to use words like morally bankrupt and diseased, and that's not right. It's people who have a tradition, centuries old, of producing a foodstuff that gives a great deal of pleasure and can either be bought or not bought. The choice is up to anybody who has enough money in their pockets to buy it. It's quite simple.
Yes, but all sorts of things can give people pleasure. Doesn't necessarily mean they're right, and a lot of those things are illegal. So it's
but where do you want the comparison to be then? With what?
Well, there's other.
I mean, it's not drugs, for example.
With cat and dog fur, would you be happy, for instance, for?
No, but I mean, cat and dog fur has been banned for a long, long time.
Not that long, and it's only in the last few years.
Yeah, but it's not something I choose to put in my mouth or on a salad either, is it?
But would you eat cat and dog meat?
No, of course I wouldn't. But that's not been.
Why not?
Because it hasn't been eaten for centuries.
Yes, but you can't. I don't think you can defend something just because something has a tradition.
Yes, we must safeguard our gastronomic heritage.
Not if it means.
Hang on a second, because I allowed you to finish earlier. What you're failing to understand is that one of the great things that's happening across Europe is that we are finally appreciating our cultural heritage and our gastronomic heritage, and that's happening very, very significantly in the UK and across the rest of the continent. And foie gras is a part of that. Now, you may choose not to eat it, Mimi may choose not to eat it, but there's nothing that should stop other people choosing to eat it or not, or chefs cooking with it.
Can I turn to Thomas? You would think that this is the only controversial item on a menu. I mean, there's a lot of food out there that is, activists would say, is inhumanely produced. Why do you think foie gras has got this particular coverage?
I think a lot of person who does act like that, they didn't see, they just saw a movie online, and they are not in the same, they didn't see the farms, they haven't been over there, they didn't see the bird fed, and so all that, I think it changed a lot after that when you see everything on site. After that, I cannot push people to like it or not like it. I just do something that I like, and voila.
Mimi Bikshi, I mean, it is unfair to compare this with cat and dog meat. I mean, this is something different, and isn't there a degree of hypocrisy in terms of how people can heartily consume meat but feel a little, and if they actually saw the process of an animal being slaughtered, a cow or whatever, they eat that with impunity. But eating something like foie gras causes this groundswell of agitation.
I'm not sure why it's unfair to compare it to cat and dog fur. A cat is a dog, is a goose, is a boy. When it comes to pain and fear, we all feel it in the same way. So it's absolutely specious of us to say that we should protect cats and dogs, but we can do whatever we like to geese and ducks or chickens for that matter.
But you're not protesting outside abattoirs with cows, and you're not protesting in where sheep are being slaughtered and where chickens are being held, are you?
Ultimately, we're a vegan advocacy organization, so yes. And
but it's less of a priority for you. I mean, people eat. You mentioned Sir Paul McCartney, who came out in 2004 urging people not to eat foie gras,
and not to eat any meat. In fact, he's a vegetarian, and he said that if slaughterhouses had glass walls, the whole world would be vegetarian. And I completely agree with that. I think that actually the problem is that people don't see where their food comes from. We're completely disassociated from what's on our plates.
Mimi raises the point of celebrity backing for the anti-foie gras campaign. And also, I mean, earlier this year we had the celebrity chef Nigella Lawson very much distancing herself from Twitter rumours that she was purchasing it and using it. Yet somebody like Gordon Ramsay, for instance, is very openly, happy to say that he cooks foie gras and is proud of it. Any particular reason why you think this is such a sensitive issue for chefs?
Well, most of them are over 21. They're quite intelligent, despite how they appear sometimes. And they have the right to choose and to decide what they want to do. And there are some who say, we will put foie gras on the menu, and there are others that don't. And they don't do it because they're being browbeaten into it. They don't do it because they've either taken a moral decision to do so, or because they enjoy cooking with foie gras and want to maintain a strong gastronomic tradition.
Should foie gras be sold in the UK? I'm discussing this with Thomas Maili, Nick Lander, Mimi Bikshi and Justin Kurzweil. What lengths would PETA go to get foie gras out of the UK?
Well, we're anything that we can. Obviously, we're a charity. Everything that we do is legal. But I think the most important thing is just to educate people, because most people, if they saw the way that foie gras was produced, would never go anywhere near it. There was a poll 2 years ago that was taken, and actually 64% of the British public would like to see an import ban as well as just a production ban. So I think, the British public are an animal-loving public, and they don't want to see animals tortured for a moment of fleeting pleasure for the palate.
Justin Kurzweil from Viva, I mean, Mimi talks about educating the public, but presumably the upshot of that is that it's educating the public to make a choice, and ultimately they need to be able to make that choice. Ethical choices are not ethical if they're forced to make them, are they?
Well, again, we live in society, and society has rules, and we decide as a society what is acceptable to us. Now, foie gras production, I would argue, the majority of the British public do not want it, and so therefore...
But sales are booming, aren't they?
Well, they are amongst the morally bankrupt, as the people I say. I mean, you can't have torture on a tin. There's torture in the tin. It's been described time and time again. And ultimately, you were talking about people like Gordon Ramsay. I mean, these are kind of like in America, you would term, if they were on radio shows, you'd term them shock jocks, because basically they make their living by shocking people and swearing and doing things, and that's why
they make their living by cooking. Actually, that's how he makes his living.
Well, I don't think
he
so.
Cooks
I think
probably to a very high standard.
He's a celebrity chef. He was a chef who became a celebrity. Come on, you've got to get your facts right.
Don't just use emotive language all the time.
Well, actually, can I bring in Thomas again? There was a Spanish producer of what's known as foie gras. Can you tell me a bit about that and what it tastes like? What's the difference in taste? And is it a viable alternative potentially?
No, I never tried it. I would like to go over there and to see how he's producing it. I hear about him. I know some of my friends who did try it. I need to go over there and try it. Yeah.
Nick Lander, I mean, what's your view on foie gras, so-called foie gras? Is that something you would, with your expertise, you would try and consider?
Well, I'd try, obviously. That's my job.
Yeah.
But I wait to be convinced.
Mimi, I mean, obviously you're a vegan organisation, but would that be a good compromise? Foie gras, potentially.
There's a foie gras being sold in Belgium in every major supermarket at the moment, and I believe in some supermarkets in France as well. And that is truly a foie gras in that it's vegan.
It has no meat product at all?
Nothing. And it's delicious.
Justin Kurzweil, I mean, foie gras, that's a potential way for the future, an alternative. Is that a compromise that you'd be prepared to make?
Well, like Mimi and Peter, Viva is a vegan advocacy group, so we would. I've tried the vegan foie gras from mainland Europe, and it is delicious, and that's what we would like to see. Now, ultimately, there is a sliding scale of suffering with any animal production. Of course, there is. But I don't. When we're talking about using emotive language, we are talking about killing, and as far as we can see it, and the majority of the British public seeing, torturing millions, tens of millions of birds each year. And I think I have no qualms about using emotive language in that instance.
It does come down to market forces, and your campaign won't really work until people stop wanting it, and that's unlikely, isn't it, Mimi?
Well, I mean, if you look at every major supermarket in the UK, they've all stopped stocking it. Marks and Spencer's and Waitrose and Ocado recently. Department store like Selfridges, like Harvey Nichols. Harvey Nichols also owns Oxo Tower. Oxo Tower are no longer serving it. You listed them already, and more places are actually self-imposing bans on foie gras because they know that it's such a controversial product, and they don't want to be associated with it.
So, Thomas, you have a fight ahead of you. Your company, which deals with producers and distributes duck products.
To be honest, I'm not here to fight with people. I'm just here to do what I like and just to enjoy and to produce product to people who wants to buy it. Now I'm not here to fight because I'm a small, very small company. If I start to fight with people, I'm not going to be able to work.
So there's a groundswell of opinion against foie gras production or foie gras production here in the United Kingdom, but in France it's still very much part of the fabric of French cuisine, isn't it? And that's not going to go away.
We live with that, and the duck is part of our culture as well, and we eat duck all the time. So, yeah, it's going to be it's a difficult choice. And I mean, we love the bird, and we love to eat it as well. So it's both sides of it. Yeah, we like it. Yeah.
Nick Lander, it's an integral part of French cuisine. It's not going to go away in a hurry, is it? You carry on eating it, won't you?
I hope not. In small doses, it's absolutely delicious. There's nothing tastes like it, and it's a connection to our agricultural and gastronomic past.
Well, sadly, we've run out of time, but I'd just like to finish by thanking my guests. Nick Lander, restaurant critic, or restaurant correspondent for the Financial Times, food critic, and author of the book The Art of the Restaurateur. Thomas Maeli, a French chef living in the UK, owner and managing director of Mr. Duck's Delicacies. Mimi Bekshi, associate director for PETA. And on the phone, Justin Kurzweil, campaigns manager for Vegetarians International Voice for Animals, or Viva. Thank you for joining me, Brendan Cole, on The Voice of Russia. Welcome back to The Voice of Russia in London. My name is Brendan Cole. Now, it doesn't come cheap, and as the supreme fruit of gastronomy, it can cost up to £17 for a 500-gram pack or more. But that won't deter foie gras from being dished up at countless Christmas celebrations. Indeed, sales are booming in London and the UK. This year, Fortnum & Mason will shift around £500,000 worth, twice the amount of a few years ago, and the British market alone is worth around £25 million a year. But in response to the anger among animal rights campaigners, many outlets have banned its sale, including Harvey Nichols, Ocado and Selfridges. You can't get it at Lord's Cricket Ground or Wimbledon. Only 2 major department stores in London, the Queen's Grocer Fortnum's and Harrods, are still holding out. But Fortnum's in particular has become the target of a sustained campaign. The reason for this outrage? Well, the clue is in the name. Foie gras is French for fatty liver. And the description of how it gets to this state is, on first here is Mimi Bekshi. She's Associate Director for the group People for the Ethical Treatment of Animals, or PETA. And on the phone we have Justin Kurswell, Campaigns Manager for Vegetarians International Voice for Animals, or VIVA. Thomas, if it's considered too cruel to make in the UK, surely it's too cruel to buy in the UK.
Well, the problem is, I think it's for all the animals production. I think there is good farm and bad farm. I can see some of the movie that we can see online. That things that I never saw because I'm a country boy, and I saw just a small farmer who does work, and they are
herring, not for the faint-hearted. At 15 weeks, the ducks or geese are placed in open-top pens and force-fed 250 grams of grain 4 times a day for the next 2 to 3 weeks. A pipe passes about 30 centimetres down the goose's throat and the grain is pumped into its crop in 2 seconds. Its liver swells up to 10 times its normal size and gives foie gras its buttery taste. But some say the animal does not suffer distress and is no more cruel than the rearing of other animals for consumption. California has banned its sale, Italy's co-op supermarket chain has stopped selling it, and the British caterer group Compass Group, which is a supplier to Michelin star restaurants, has dropped foie gras from its list. And the fast food chain Wendy's has just announced that it was pulling foie gras off its menu in Japan. So, is it torture in a tin as defined by animal rights activists, or simply a traditional delicacy that dates back centuries, whose production is no more cruel than other products? Well, to discuss this, I'm joined by Nick Lander. He's a restaurant correspondent for the FT and author of the book The Art of the Restaurateur. Thomas Maeli, who's a French chef living in the UK and managing director of Mr. Duck's Delicacies, which produces and distributes duck products to delis and retailers in London. Also